All right, let's dive into one of the most, let's say, candid confessions in early Islamic history. And you see that title? Umar fled Uhud like a mountain goat? I did not make that up. That comes directly from the man himself, Umar ibn al-Khattab. It's a story that starts with a pretty wild image, but it leads us straight to some of the deepest questions about leadership, courage, and who was really fit to lead the community. So let's get into it. And there it is, the quote of the hour. This isn't from some obscure hidden text. According to mainstream Sunni sources like the Tafsir of al-Tabari, Omar was giving a sermon, and when he got to the Quranic verse about the folks who ran away at the Battle of Uhud, he just paused and shared this little gem about himself. I saw myself leaping like a mountain goat. I mean, you can just picture it, can't you? It's an unbelievably vivid admission of bailing on the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ and the entire battlefield. Okay, so as funny as that mental image is, this is where the story takes a very, very serious turn. You see, for a regular soldier, maybe you could overlook it. But for someone who would later become the caliph, the absolute leader of the Muslims, well, that changes things. This isn't just a funny anecdote anymore. It becomes a central piece of evidence in the massive debate over succession. The big question is, does doing something like this automatically disqualify you from leadership? To really get why this is such a big deal, we have to understand what the stakes are. In Islam, running away from a battle isn't just seen as a moment of weakness or, being a coward. It's considered a major sin, a huge one. And understanding just how serious it is the key to this whole debate. It's so serious, in fact, that it has its own specific legal name in Islamic law, tawali yom al-zahf. It literally means turning your back on the day of the advance. When something has its own fancy legal term, you know the religion does not mess around with it. This isn't just about being scared. It's classified as a defined spiritual crime. It's an act of betrayal. And the reason it's taken so seriously, it's spelled out crystal clear, right in the Quran. This verse from Surah Al-Anfal leaves absolutely no room for interpretation. If you flee, you've earned God's wrath, and your destination is hell, an evil destination. The language is as severe as it gets. This is the divine verdict on the act of tawali yom al-zahf. And just to put this into perspective, let's look at the company this sin keeps. There's a famous hadith in Sahih al-Bukhari about the 7 destructive sins. These are like the absolute worst of the worst. And what's on the list? You've got shirk, associating partners with God. You've got murder, sorcery, and right there alongside them, fleeing on the day of battle. We're talking spiritually catastrophic level stuff. So the argument here is that Umar basically confessed to one of the biggest sins in Islam. So here's the bottom line. If fleeing is that bad for a regular person, what on earth does it mean for a leader, a caliph? A primary condition for leadership, one that everyone agrees on, is shuja'ah, courage. A leader is supposed to be the shield of the nation. How can you possibly command an army to stand its ground when you've got a documented history of, well, leaping away like a mountain goat? Now, you might be thinking, okay, the Battle of Uhud was pure chaos. Maybe it was just a one-time thing, a moment of panic. Well, this is where the historical record points to another key battle as evidence of a pattern, the siege of the mighty fortress of Khaybar. This was a real test of leadership. The setting is the 7th year after the Hijrah. The mission? Take down the massive, heavily fortified settlement of Khaybar. And these weren't just some mud huts. These were serious military strongholds defended by legendary warriors. Taking Khaybar was absolutely essential for the survival of the early Muslim community. The stakes could not have been higher. So the campaign kicks off. Day 1, the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ hands the banner of command to Abu Bakr. He leads the charge and fails. They're defeated and they retreat. Okay, round 2, day 2, the Prophet gives the banner to Umar. And the result? Exactly the same. Another defeat, another retreat. That's 2 days, 2 future caliphs, and 2 failures. And this second retreat wasn't just a simple failure. Oh no, it was a complete breakdown of command. Sources describe Umar's return from the field with his own soldiers calling him a coward, and he was right back at them, accusing them of being cowards. It was a total mess. Finger-pointing, shattered morale, the whole thing. So after 2 straight days of defeat and everyone blaming each other, morale is at rock bottom. That night, the Prophet ﷺ makes an announcement that's going to flip the script entirely. He sets the stage for a dramatic contrast, a pivot from the commanders who ran away to the one who was the answer, Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib, alayhi salam. Listen to this. This is one of the most powerful statements from the Prophet ﷺ found in top-tier sources like Sahih Bukhari and Muslim. He says, "Tomorrow I will give the banner to a man who is a 𝗓𝗃. Qirar means someone who attacks over and over. 𝗓𝗃 means not a fleer. Now, after the last 2 days of, fleeing, this wasn't just a random description. This was a direct diagnosis of the problem and the announcement of the cure. The next morning, everyone's buzzing, wondering who it's going to be. The Prophet ﷺ asks for Ali ibn Abi Talib, but they tell him Imam Ali alayhi salam is suffering from a terrible eye infection and can barely see. The Prophet has him brought over, heals him with a prayer, and hands him the banner. And what happens next? Imam Ali alayhi salam, the designated non-fleer, goes out there, defeats Khaybar's champion, and the fortress is conquered. Just like that, problem solved. So let's just put it all side by side for a second. At Uhud, you've got Umar and Abu Bakr fleeing. Meanwhile, Imam Ali alayhi salam is standing guard over the Prophet, getting wounded dozens of times. Then at Khaybar, you've got 2 failed campaigns ending in retreat. Then Imam Ali alayhi salam takes command and gets a decisive victory. When you look at it like this, the difference in their conduct on the battlefield is, it's pretty staggering. Now, obviously, this historical record presents a bit of a challenge for anyone who supports the leadership of the first caliphs. How do you square all this with the idea that a leader must be brave? Well, this led to a very creative theological argument that tries to redefine what courage even means. This argument comes from the famous 14th century scholar Ibn Taymiyyah. He basically says, look, physical bravery on the battlefield, that's not the important part. What really matters for a leader is this inner strength, this courage of the heart. And based on this totally invisible, unmeasurable quality, he concludes that Abu Bakr was braver than Omar, and get this, that Omar was braver than Imam Ali alayhi salam. It's an argument that completely shifts the goalposts from actual actions to a supposed internal state. But critics of this idea just ask, how does that work exactly? They compare fleeing and returning with defending the Prophet until you're nearly dead. They compare a very thin combat record with a long list of legendary victories against impossible odds. From their perspective, this whole courage of the heart thing looks like a philosophical backflip designed to ignore the hard, documented facts of what actually happened on the battlefield. And all of this brings us right back to the central question. After you look at all the evidence, the Quranic verses, the confession about the mountain goat, the failures at Khaybar, how do these different figures stack up? This isn't about picking favorites. It's about looking at the historical record and judging them by the standards laid out in their own religious texts. Let's just lay out the scorecard from the 2 key battles. Umar fled at Uhud like a mountain goat, fled at Khaybar amidst chaos. Abu Bakr and Uthman also on the list of those who fled. And Imam Ali alayhi salam defended the Prophet at Uhud, conquered the unconquerable at Khaybar. The argument is simply that the pattern here is undeniable. It shows a consistent and clear difference in how they acted when everything was on the line.
And you've got to understand, for Shia Muslims, this isn't just trivia. These events are seen as divine litmus tests. The battlefield strips everything away and reveals your true character. And from their point of view, these moments provided crystal clear proof of who was qualified to lead and who was actually chosen for it by Allah and His Messenger ﷺ.
So we end with this question. If the Quran says fleeing is a destructive sin, and if everyone agrees that courage is an absolute requirement for leadership, then what are we supposed to make of these events? Events recorded, by the way, not in Shia books, but in their own texts. This history is at the very heart of the debate over who had the right to lead, leaving it for every person to look at the evidence and decide for themselves.